One of the biggest challenges, actually, is people are so familiar with their own life that they don't realize what they have in their own life. They don't realize their own experiences because, as a friend of mine says, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. So many of my clients, they say, well, I don't really have any epic stories to tell. I don't really feel like I have any stories worth telling. And I'm here to tell you, if you are alive and breathing, you have stories to tell. And here's the crazy thing. They don't have to be epic. In fact, some of the most powerful stories that you will find are not epic. They are 100% normal. They are pedestrian. They are everyday. Why is this? Because we all experience the normal everyday thing. This is how you can say, oh, you get it. I understand. You live this life. So do I. I feel connection, that kind of a thing. It doesn't have to be epic. And everyone, you listening, you, talking to you have stories to tell. And they are incredible when they are crafted in the right way and delivered in the right way to the right people for the right reason.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to today's episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I'm so happy you decided to join me today because it is game day here at PYP. And you know what that means. I have got a tremendous guest who is suited up and ready to take the field. He's going to take us into his leadership journey, which includes the power of storytelling and how we can all leverage our own stories for more happiness and productivity and just a better life all around. His name is Jeff Bartsch. Jeff, are you ready for kickoff?
I am stoked, Mary Lou. This is going to be good.
It really is. And so, team, here is something I know about Jeff. He is a visionary storyteller, a communication strategist, and founder at Story Greenlight. With over 20 years of experience in the entertainment industry and online business, Jeff has helped shape content for clients, including ABC, NBC, Universal, Disney, Apple, and many others. Jeff's commentary has been featured in major publications, including Time Magazine, USA Today, and the Associated Press. Through Story Greenlight, Jeff and his team empower business experts and leaders to tell their stories, serve more clients, and expand their impact in the world. He believes that the power of story is within reach of everyone, and that human connection is everything. And I could not agree more. So, Jeff, I am so excited that you are here today. And let's get the game started with you telling us your story about when you first got the call to leadership. How old were you? What was going on in your life? And how did answering that call lead to what you do today?
Well, I would say it's not so much the idea of leadership within the classic traditional sense as much as maybe the call to influence, which I believe we all have that. And that started for me. It literally started for me at age 4 when I started classical piano training. And for the first 20 years of my life, I was known as Jeff the Piano Guy. And I got really good at being, at playing piano. And if people are familiar with classical music, I really gravitated towards Bach and Mozart because they were super clean, super technical. I was the nerdy kid with my nose in a book. I was all about, let's play the notes on the page because there they are and I can play them and everyone says that I'm amazing. So that's what I did. And a lot of my reps that I got in were on Sunday mornings in church. And I got lots of reps doing lots of stuff, lots of music there. Until one day, there was one of the older church musicians pulled me aside and she said, Jeff, it is all well and good to play the notes on the page. But when you get older, you need to learn how to play from your soul.
Oh.
And I said to myself, okay, and I was in elementary school. I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. And everyone was telling me that I was doing this amazing job. And here's this lady telling me this garbage about what play from your soul. That's got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. So I just kind of smiled and ignored her until some years later, the way, as I continued learning how to play the piano and how to actually do what she was saying without realizing it and actually bring the music to life, to elevate things more than just what I was doing with the notes on the page. People's reactions started to change, and they started saying, instead of, "Oh, Jeff, you're such a great piano player," they would say, "Jeff, that was the exact song that I needed to hear. Thank you so much for that song." And every once in a while, people would say, "Jeff, the way you played your music today brought me into an encounter with God."
Oh my gosh.
And so I started realizing, number one, that this was way bigger than me. This wasn't just about Jeff being an amazing piano player. There's something powerful going on here.
Yeah.
And I realized that lady was right, that there is, I was doing the best that I could playing the notes on the page. And I think that we all do the best that we can playing the notes on whatever our pages happen to be. The thing is, there is another level of communication that takes things up, that elevates the way that we communicate. And I've seen that happen over and over and over and over for the last 40 years in my own life. When I was doing music production in junior high, the same thing happened in video production in junior and high school, radio in college and film school, and then 20 years doing this stuff out in LA. And now working with clients to help them take their own messages and elevate that to the next level. It is incredibly powerful. And it applies to literally any interaction that one human being has with another human being. It is incredibly powerful, and it can be applied in so many different ways. And I just geek out about this stuff, and I could talk about forever. So I'll just stop now.
I love it. What an interesting, you went from being a classical pianist to now you work with some of the top brands in the world, leaders from those companies to help them communicate their soul story. Not just, we were talking the pre-chat, the tactics of storytelling versus that big picture, that long range, that strategy. So why don't we get into that, the nuts and bolts of what makes a story not so great and what makes a story do what that person said to you in church that day when they said, I needed to hear that song, Jeff. I needed to hear that story, Mary Lou or Mike or Janet or whoever it may be. Like, take us from what most people do or think storytelling is to what it really is as you understand it and have witnessed it working because of what you teach. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If the idea of story feels familiar, that's because, number one, it should. Because all of us are living a story every single moment that we are breathing. From day one to our final breath, we are living a story. Anytime we interact with another human being, our storyline intersects with their storyline. And of course, when you apply this to leadership in business, then you see, okay, we have multiple levels of stories all stacking on top of each other. And do these stories line up? That's the question. And if the answer is no, then is this an issue? How do you change that? You can go down all kinds of rabbit holes there. So when we talk about storytelling, it does feel very familiar. And it feels like something, oh, well, anyone can do that. And it's true, anyone can. And we all know that anyone can do it badly.
Yeah.
And this is what I refer to as tactical storytelling, not doing it badly, but just the idea of delivering a specific story. That is the boots on the ground, communicating a message from one person to another, or from one person to a group. Excuse me. And so when that happens, it can be done badly, and we all know what it's like when it is. It can also be done incredibly powerfully. And the reason that power happens on a tactical level is when the storyteller understands the big picture strategic level of storytelling, which is why I always seek to elevate the conversation to strategic storytelling, not just standing around a water cooler and saying, here's what happened over the weekend kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that's the starting point. It is familiar. It exists on a tactical level, but the power comes from the strategic level.
Okay. So tactical level might be something like all stories have a beginning, middle, and end. And
yes,
characters, and you might throw in some dialogue. I mean, kind of the components, the parts.
Mm-hmm.
Give us for instance, with a strategic storytelling approach. What might that look like?
Everything begins with the definition of what a story is. A lot of people in the business world are familiar with Donald Miller's work with his book, Building a Story Brand.
Mm-hmm.
I love especially one of his earlier books called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. And in that book, he talks about, one of the lines is, a story is where a character wants something and overcomes obstacles to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I add to that as my own version of Miller's definition. A story is where a character wants something, overcomes obstacles to get it, and experiences transformation as a result. So when you see those ideas, you can narrow them down, or you can expand them out to the most epic scale you can imagine. Multiple movie series, years and years and years of a television series, whatever, a series of novels, all that. Or it can be shrunken down to just a few words. Identity, desire, obstacles, transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire point, if I had to tell people, well, what is the single most important thing to include in a story, it is that word change. Show change.
Yes.
Because this is what we're all looking for. We have a deep, fundamental human desire to see change in our lives. And as we lead others and as we serve others, we absolutely want to see change happen in our people's lives too.
We do.
So that is the beginning. That is the beginning of what a strategic story starts from. And it does not start from our perspective. It starts from the perspective of the person who is on the receiving end. It is not about us. It is about the audience. Because when we as a communicator understand who is hearing us, what they want, what's getting in their way, and what change they want to see happen, this is how humans connect in the first place. This is how any business happens. This is how a marketing conversation can happen. This is how a sales conversation can happen. And sometimes you don't even need to tell a tactical story, but the power is always there. It is always governed by those big picture ideas at the strategic level.
Yeah. Wow. I love the 4 elements: the identity, desire, obstacles, and transformation. And I want to ask you, Jeff, I'm aware of, and I think many people listening are aware of, the proliferation these days of, I've hit rock bottom and I came back. I mean, that's an arc that we see a lot, where a person, a man or a woman, buys into the cultural definition of success and they chase whatever that is. It often involves a lot of money, cars, women, men, fancy houses, and so forth and so on, and then reach a point where it's not satisfying. They're still seeking. They wake up one day. I always go to that one Talking Heads song where he says, "This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife." Do you know what song I'm talking about, right? As the days go by and the river holds you down, like, I can't think of the title of the song off the top of my head. It may come to me. But anyway, it's that it is that universal, I've reached a pinnacle and now this isn't working for me anymore. And sometimes people will self-destruct through booze, drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex addiction, whatever it may be. The reason I'm bringing this up is, have all the stories been told? Right? When you're working with people, they might sit there and say, "Well, Jeff, why would my story?" I mean, I'm like everybody else who hit rock bottom, or just my vice might have been gambling versus alcohol, for example. But
Mhm.
what is it about the individual and going through that same identity, desire, obstacles, transformation that we still come back and want to hear it, even though we've heard it before? Does that make, that's what I want to know your perspective on. Do we reach a saturation point with this arc, or are we always just naturally drawn to it because we're human?
I think I think you pretty much just hit on it. It's the idea of this is humanity. This is the human experience. And a lot of the times we are in a place where we are living a life, we are living a story as a character who wants something.
Yeah.
And we think that getting the thing will change who we are. And a lot of people have reached those different levels. I mean, I've reached those levels in different ways myself. And I thought, I thought when I reached this pinnacle or this level that then I would be happy because I got what I want. Well, no, I'm still the same person. I'm still the same person. So it's, we find ourselves thinking that achieving things will make us happy. And they very, very rarely do.
So tied to, are the stories that we tell then related to that realization that you just shared that, oh, getting the car really didn't make me happy, or winning, the woman or the man of my dreams. I'm still waking up in the morning, still got to put one leg on at a time, right, of my pants or whatever. When you're working with clients and people are sitting there and they're saying, Jeff, I want to tell better stories. I want to connect with others. What are some of the obstacles you have to help them push through in order for them to show up and share that soul level? I'm sure you see a lot of different layers of, ooh, not going there.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a range of levels of disclosure, levels of vulnerability that are appropriate or not appropriate at any given moment. Just, in terms of human interaction, everyone always talks about, okay, well, you're not going to meet someone at a bar and immediately propose marriage, kind of a thing.
Right.
Because, and the reason for that is you're already skipping lots of layers of intimacy in those varying levels, in the very basic foundational, super safe, not rocking anyone's boat. And then you're asking for big commitments right off the top of right off the bat. So in terms of when I'm working with clients in developing thought leadership and developing their own stories, one of the biggest challenges actually is people are so familiar with their own life that they don't realize what they have in their own life. They don't realize their own experiences because, as a friend of mine says, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. And so many of my clients, they say, well, I don't really have any epic stories to tell. I don't really feel like I have any stories worth telling. And I'm here to tell you, if you are alive and breathing, you have stories to tell.
Okay.
And here's the crazy thing. They don't have to be epic. In fact, some of the most powerful stories that you will find are not epic. They are 100% normal. They are pedestrian. They are everyday. Why is this? Because we all experience the normal everyday thing. This is how you can say, oh, you get it. I understand. You live this life. So do I. I feel a connection, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be epic. And everyone, you listening, you talking to you have stories to tell, and they are incredible when they are crafted in the right way and delivered in the right way to the right people for the right reason.
Yeah. Wow. It's hard for a lot of people to see their lives as having something interesting because of what you just said. We know ourselves so well, and we tend to be hard on ourselves, like, oh, and we also know all the mistakes we've made. And we tend to focus on those versus, I know I've had to work on receiving the praise and the compliments and acknowledging that, yeah, I achieved that. And yet, to your point, it is the everyday struggle. It's just the regular life things that sometimes is what really draws us in. The epic tale may feel so far away and unrealistic that it's hard to relate to.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering going back to something you said about levels of disclosure and levels of vulnerability. Vulnerability is really sexy right now because of Brene Brown's work. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who are focused on how do we become more vulnerable so we can connect on a deeper level. And it isn't just so, how you doing, but really getting in, talk about understanding how to know when to disclose and when to be vulnerable when telling a story versus when to not go so into the weeds of our lives.
I think, well, I'm gonna fall back on the whole "it depends" answer because I'm not gonna sit here and say that there is a one fast answer for all that because that involves nuance for sure because people are complicated and situations are varied. So, but what I will say though is people are getting more and more tired of having all the imperfections airbrushed out of the world because it is not the way the world works. We all have blemishes on our face. I am not 21 years old anymore. I have bags under my eyes. I don't love that. My hair is going gray. I'm earning that.
Right.
So it's one of those things where, life does not look like the front of a fashion magazine.
Yes.
And so I think when it comes to vulnerability and disclosure, one of the most powerful things we can do is to admit that we don't have it all together.
Yeah.
We don't have it all. We don't have everything buttoned up. We do make mistakes. And especially when we're leading others, man, oh man, when you have the confidence as a leader to admit, let me tell you about a time when I really messed this up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not fun. And this is what happened. And this is what I did to make things right, or this is what needed to happen in order to turn things around. You are instantly far more likely to have people latch onto that because, number one, you're admitting that you're a real human being. You're not flawless. And it's also being driven by inherent story structure. There is a character who wants something and they didn't get what they want.
Yeah.
There's a fork in the road. There's a plot twist. And so there's an obstacle that came up. And so when anytime that we hear about obstacles, people will say, oh, is the character going to get what they want? That's the driving story question. So as we are, as we tell those kind of stories, those are inherently relatable. Now, I will also say you can draw on strategic storytelling to be relatable without ever telling a traditional story. There is one of the ideas that I always talk about with my clients. I call it the thing under the thing. So many people talk about surface level things. And, so for example, a friend came and visited me out in Hollywood back in the day, and we were walking on Hollywood Boulevard, and we were talking about how, if you look down at our feet, it's this sidewalk with stars in it, with names on those stars. And each star represents the career of a person in either radio or TV or film or whatever. And so on the surface, the thing is a sidewalk decorated with stars. But when people see that sidewalk, they end up feeling things one way or another. And the question is, what are they feeling? What do the people walking on that sidewalk want? And what do they care about? Because if you're an actor coming to LA and you're walking on that sidewalk represents your dream or wanting to, the things that you want to see fulfilled in your life. that same actor could be walking that same sidewalk a year later. They've been busting their tail and they've decided this is not the path for me. I'm giving up. That same sidewalk now represents broken dreams.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we all have these kind of things. If this was in a video format, you could see behind me, there is a lamp hanging from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm telling you, it's just a pendant lamp. It's an inexpensive pendant lamp from IKEA. But I could tell you things about that lamp that would make you feel things if I knew who I'm talking to and what they want. So the point of all this is we can create meaning by attaching meaning to surface level things. And it's an incredibly powerful thing. And it's driven by the strategic storytelling framework.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Oh, man. I can't help but think of, the actor Matt Perry, who just died.
Mm-hmm.
And I had not read or listened to his memoir, but you want to talk about going into the nitty gritty of his life and the stories behind what we saw on the screen versus what was really going on. And it seems to me that in an era where we can all be visible because of platforms, because of technology,
mm-hmm.
and the fact that humans haven't changed despite all the technology that has come along, we still have wants, we still have dreams, and yet we still stumble and fall, and sometimes happen to go right on the fork, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes the fork ends up, we take a left turn instead of the right turn, and the left turn takes us into a dark place or a place that didn't work out the way we thought, and is that metaphorical broken dream. For him, it was addiction, right? That was what was below the surface. And I just wonder, what does it take for a person to be able to own the shadow, right? The side of them that isn't perfect when the world is still, even though you said, and I agree with you, that we're getting tired of everything being airbrushed out. And yet that shininess of being perfect is still so powerful. People are still being sucked into, yes, I'm not 21, but I could look 21, right? Or if I just do this with that. How do you see the work that you're doing, particularly with leaders, to usher in an era where we're more comfortable accepting our blemishes, our flaws, and showing up authentically on these platforms, where we can do business and we can showcase how wonderful we are in terms of helping to solve problems or have a product that makes people smile, right? I just feel like we're at an interesting point in time where there's a pull still to be perfect. And yet what you're talking about is, no, we're tired of that. Just be yourself. And people, there's that tension.
Yeah, it's a tension for sure.
Yeah.
Because I would say it's like, it's very similar in that with the levels of vulnerability and intimacy that between any human being, it's it's a continuum. And
Mm-hmm.
I would also say that it's a continuum in terms of the circles. Maybe think of it in terms of concentric circles, in terms of, okay, what's the level of personal or professional disclosure that we do in public forums compared to, if you're a leader and people want to know, do you as a leader have the competence and the confidence to do what it takes within any given situation? That is the number one question. They want to know, do you have what it takes? And so if you're constantly showing up saying, Oh, guys, I really blew it here, man, oh man, and when that, you can see how that would very easily turn into self-defeating in terms of, in terms of building connections of confidence with the people that you're speaking to.
Right.
However, once you have established that, maybe the elements of personal disclosure and personal failings, frankly, I think they're far more powerful when done in a non-public setting where trust has already been established. Well, because everyone is, everyone is always comparing.
Yes.
It's how do I measure up? How do I compare to them, and et cetera. So, I think the biggest shift, though, I think the biggest beacon in terms of this is the idea of going back to understanding who the audience is, what they want, what's getting in their way, and how can we come alongside them, not as the hero, because the audience is the hero. We want to come alongside as the guide to help them get what they want. So,
Right.
Zig Ziglar always said, you can get everything in life you want if you'll just help people get what they want.
Yes.
It's that right there. It is, he verbalized narrative structure of human connection right there in that sentence. And so when we start wondering too much, am I oversharing too much? Am I being too over disclosing things? I think the question we need to move back towards is, who am I talking to? What do they want? Does this message that I'm putting out there help them get what they want?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's powerful. So for listeners, could you take us through a simple exercise on getting started with figuring out what story we might tell or to have in our arsenal of stories? And again, it's not to be told in every situation, because that question of who am I talking to is really important. But I think it would be really valuable to hear just a simple exercise that maybe you work with clients. Give us a taste of where somebody might start.
Yes.
To start to mine their life for some of those nuggets of, ooh, that would be a good story, even though it's not epic. It's still something I know people could relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I will say the number one thing, the number one way to get buried is by saying, okay, what are all the things that I've experienced in my life? Oh, good luck. That for those of us who've been alive more than just a few years, that's you will drown in your own list of story points. So what I always start is we always need to start with the end in mind and reverse engineer.
Okay.
So the question is, what do you want to accomplish with the story? So that is, that's what you want to accomplish. Who is the audience? Who are they? What do they want? What's keeping them from getting it, et cetera? And you reverse engineer from there. So, little inside baseball. I know we're in a football context here, but if we can skip over to baseball,
we can go to any sport. Big baseball fan.
So if we want to go inside baseball a little bit, so I opened up this conversation, and you asked me, when did I discover my call to leadership? Mm-hmm. And so I'd been thinking about that. And so I knew that in that moment, my goal was for people to understand, who's hearing this conversation, that Jeff knows what he's talking about, and Jeff has a message that relates to me. Those are the things that I was looking for. That was the reason why I told that story. So then I wanted to connect that to say, okay, how can I tell a story that relates to something that represents who I am and what I do?
Yes.
And that is when that's when the things start to get tricky, because you have to say, okay, well, what do I truly do? What am I doing in this context? Well, in my case, I'm a storyteller and a communication strategist for business experts and leaders.
Yes.
And the goal is to say, take your regular message and elevate it to something extraordinary. Elevate the way you communicate. What is a time in my life when I realized that that was what I was doing, or even better yet, I was challenged to do that? And so that's when I go all the way back to the beginning, and I go back to a specific moment where I realized something. Or in this case, talking about the lady who called me out and saying, Jeff, you got to do more than just play the notes on the page. You got to play from your soul. I didn't change right then, but I changed later. And I was able to see that in that moment, the lady was right.
Yes.
So that's a specific example of starting with the end in mind. What do you want to see happen? What is the value of the message? And then you want to say, what is an instance? What is a moment where you experienced or the people involved in that story experienced that value? Then you connect the two, and you continue building backwards from there.
Nice. Begin with the end in mind. Spoken like a story engineer, right? You envision the end the result. Only in this case, it's not physical. It's a feeling. It's an emotion. It's to move people to action, or to, again, just to feel something, because sometimes that's the whole point of telling a story.
100%.
You want people to feel, right?
I will actually, I'll even add on top of that. So people who know the phrase begin with the end in mind, know that comes from Stephen Covey's epically best-selling book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes.
That is the first thing. That is the first habit that he says. How do you become an incredibly effective person? He literally sets you up to think about, you are at your own funeral and you are saying, okay, what are the people saying at my funeral?
Right.
And that is the idea of, that's the idea of taking strategic storytelling to the lifelong scope of who am I? What did I want? Who did I want to serve? How did I want to serve them? How has the world changed because you or I have been here? It is all the same thing. It's all the same thing, which is why, again, I just geek out about this stuff. It's all connected.
It is. And it's such great work. It's human work. And I imagine that your clients, after they've achieved what they came to you for, just will always remember the work they did with you, because you were able to get into a space that they'd never gone before. And they experienced a transformation working with you. And any of us who are in the personal development, the professional development space, where we are guiding people through an experience that will, when they come out on the other end, they will not be the same as they were when they entered. And you, with what you do in terms of helping people to craft their stories, improve their communication skills, improve their leadership skills, see results in their teams and their businesses, and ultimately the bottom line, which that drives business. We can't get away from that, right?
100%. You know what? Could I just give a specific example of this? So one of my clients that I was working with, former VP of operations for a $150 million company, now working as a financial consultant, and so he was wanting to bring me on to work with him on a presentation that already existed, but needed to be customized to something that he needed to, that he would present, and on behalf of the company that he was consulting with. So when that process began, we started figuring out, okay, who is he? Who is his? What's his origin story? What are some of the supporting stories that can be worked into this presentation that he's customizing for himself? And so we went through that. We weren't playing Connect the Soul per se. We weren't playing life coach or anything. But so he and I went through that process. He got the presentation done. Is now that presentation is now recorded. It's out in the world, and he's continuing to give it. There are clients coming in based on that presentation and those appearances that he's making, turning into very, very profitable annual contracts based on that presentation and his personalization of it. Now, here's the time when it gets real, because this same man was diagnosed with cancer recently.
Oh my goodness! Oh wow!
And that caught everyone, everyone involved with this. It caught us all off guard.
Yeah.
But here's what happened. He emailed me and said, Jeff, I've come to realize that figuring out learning about these stories and actually considering what I've experienced and what I have to offer, man, I am going to kick this cancer in the butt, because there is so much work left to do. There is so much left to do.
Wow.
And I'm going, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what he signed up for. But man, he's right. There's a lot of work left to be done. And it's so incredibly encouraging to see that this process and thinking about these things can help us think in that way.
Yes. Yes. And I believe that the power of story can heal. I mean, I'm not a medical professional. That's a personal belief of mine, that you can overcome some of the hardest challenges that we face. And I love his attitude. Thank you for sharing that. That is raw. That is real. Here he is, just, it seems like he's just getting started and getting all the success. And then out of boom, left field, here comes the diagnosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet story can be used for continuing to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
It really can.
Absolutely.
Wow.
You know what? One of the most powerful things we can do with this idea of the character who wants something, overcomes obstacles to get it, and experiences transformation as a result, one of the most powerful things we can do is change the very first thing at the very beginning of all that. The identity of the character.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a musical family. I figured that, I was so good at piano. I figured I'd be playing piano as my main thing for the rest of my life. I was Jeff the piano guy for years and years and years and years. And then there came a time when that identity started to shed. I was no longer Jeff the piano guy. I started adding layers. I was Jeff the video guy in school, or I was Jeff the radio guy, or I was Jeff the television guy in Hollywood. And any time that we change our identity, or we put on a different identity, everything downstream changes.
Yep.
So if you're thinking about what you want to see happen in your life, one of the most powerful things you can do is to start telling yourself, who am I? Who do I need to be? Because when we change who we're being, and this is, we all know this is straight up life coaching right here, but it's driven by storytelling,
It sure is. Oh, it is.
When we change who we are being, we change the things that we want. Jeff, the piano guy in elementary school, is not the same person as Jeff, the storyteller and communication strategist, working with business experts and leaders, because those two identities want completely different things, have completely different obstacles, and have completely different outcomes. And the scope of change is completely different as well.
Sure is. Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that it's okay to change. And you don't have to be the same thing. I think I've seen it. People get boxed in and believe, well, this is what I have to be because this is what I've always been. And there's tension there. And as we, move through our lives, our stories are going to morph with us. And I know a lot of people listening today have been on the planet a few years, and maybe facing that next iteration of who they want to become, and may have an inkling of it, may be experimenting as we speak right now. The power of storytelling, it sounds like what you can help people do is map that out through storytelling of where are you going? Because, that exercise with Stephen Covey that you were sharing about imagine it's the day of your funeral. I've done exercises where write your obituary.
Right.
What are people, what's going to be written about you when your life is no longer, when you physically are no longer here?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough exercise, but it's also really powerful because it forces you to think about what really matters to me. Who am I in the world? Who are my supporting cast?
Mm-hmm.
Am I really leading? Am I really who was it? I think it was Bob Proctor said, are you the star of your movie, or are you just a supporting actor? Or are you not even in the show? You got to decide about your life. And so what is the biggest leadership and or life lesson, Jeff, that you have learned from your journey as a storytelling strategist that you can impart to listeners?
I would say that it is really easy, especially today. I'd say it's really easy to rely on personality or information to get what we want. Whereas when we focus more on connection, when we focus more on not being served, but being here to serve, I believe that is truly where we find a direction to say, okay, who am I here to serve? What can I do? Who can I collaborate with? Who can I connect with? What can we do together to bring the change that we want to see in the world?
Yeah.
And it all starts with thinking about who we're connecting with, who we want to connect with, what do they want? What's getting in their way, and how can we help them get it?
And would you say that a lot of times what's getting in our way is also what other people are experiencing? And so sometimes by starting with looking at what has gotten in my way in the past that I've overcome. And I've heard it said that sometimes our clients are who we once were, our best clients, because we've gone through something and at one time we wanted what we now have. And now we are delivering it in some form or fashion.
Well, I will say, for people familiar with The Hero's Journey, made popular by Joseph Campbell, this is where the identity that you just described, the identities that you just described, are everyone thinks that they want to be the hero, but as Donald Miller says in his book Hero on a Mission, Miller says, and I happen to agree, that the position to which we should aspire is not to be the hero. The thing that we should aspire to is to be the guide.
Yes.
Because the guide is a hero who's been there and done that, and now is turning around to give a hand out to people who are traveling along the same path.
Yes.
So, green complexion and ear hair aside, with Yoda from the Star Wars movies, he had lived and walked that path, and he walks with a limp. He's taken the hits, and yet he knew what he had to offer. And that's why he was so incredibly powerful in being a guide to Luke Skywalker.
Yep.
And Luke Skywalker was a mess.
He was a complete mess.
Feel like, be encouraged. Be encouraged, fellow heroes on the journey. The heroes do not have their act together a lot of the time.
They don't.
But man, the heroes are the one who say, yes, I will face the obstacles. And the guide comes alongside and says, I've been there. Let me help you through.
Right. The part of the hero's journey that always fascinated me, and to this day fascinates me, if you look at that, what Joseph Campbell created, there's a point in the story of the hero's journey when the hero descends into darkness. It could be literal darkness. It could be metaphorical darkness. And when the hero emerges, that the hero is no longer the same. And it's at that point, that's the transformation. Now the hero is in a position to return to the place, the ordinary world, and bring back the gifts of the darkness. And that That's the power. And I feel like what you're doing, Jeff, with the work you do is you're helping people identify that that aha moment or aha moments of their lives, and then containing them in a way that makes sense for, again, who am I talking to? What are the goals here? What are we trying to achieve? Because it does no good for a hero to return to the ordinary world with a gift that nobody wants.
Yes.
Or they're not looking for it. It's like, oh, that's a big pile of grapes. Well, we're allergic. Or
Yeah.
That's a silly example, but that's the point.
Well, and I will say that is equally, we in our pre-show conversation, you mentioned that there are members of your audience who are considering the idea of stepping out into a new chapter.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, from years of banging my head against the wall, it's one thing to have a gift that is worth offering to the world. It is an incredible challenge to seek to build a business around offering a gift that solves a problem that people don't think they have.
Yep.
And that they are not willing to pay money for.
Yep.
Ask me how I know this.
You've been there.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So that's, yeah, I'm 100%. I agreed with that. Yeah. You have to know who the audience is, what their problems are, so that your gifts that you've literally gone through hell and back to bring back are actually valued.
Right.
Either conceptually, monetarily, fill in the blank.
Oh, man, that has so many applications, what you just said. So many applications. Wow, that's powerful. Thank you for emphasizing that. And for people who are curious about you and would like to know more about your services and how you help leaders and business people amplify their voices, become more visible, get more results from the power of their stories, where do you hang out online?
There is one URL that I'd like to send your listeners to. It is storygreenlight.com/PYP. And it's for Team PYP. Head on over there. And I actually have a checklist for how you can actually start gathering some of those elements, how you can go through that process, start with the end in mind, start putting all those ideas in place. There's a checklist where you can download that for yourself. There's a link to my own podcast. And of course, sometimes the most beneficial thing that we can do for ourselves is to get expert help. So if you're looking to connect with me to work together, there's a way to do that there too.
Wonderful. So team, you know that the link to connect with Jeff, get this great resource, will be on his show notes page over at pyppodcast.com. And I will also put the books that he's about to tell us about that have been instrumental. He's mentioned the Donald Miller collection, which I've interviewed people on the show who are Story Brand certified, but certainly worth a read if you haven't heard of Donald Miller. But are there a couple of books, Jeff, that you turn to or just made such a big difference that it's right there on your shelf, or maybe you read it every day? Some people have that.
Well, I would say within the context of this conversation, there are two books that I'd recommend. The first one is what I mentioned earlier. It's called Hero on a Mission, A Path to a Meaningful Life by Donald Miller. And he talks about the context of how his own life used to suck. He was not a happy person and people were not happy being around him, and how he changed and how the elements of strategic story were put into play in that context and how we can put that into play for ourselves. So Hero on a Mission by Donald Miller. Highly recommend that.
Okay.
Then here's another one that is that people may not have heard of. It's called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And the subtitle is How World-Class Entrepreneurs Achieve More by Doing Less. And it's by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And I will say, if you don't consider yourself an entrepreneur, don't worry about that. The concepts are mental dynamite for the concept of, okay, who am I and who do I need to be in order to shape my story forward? And one of the core elements of that, Ben Hardy is an organizational psychologist, and Dan Sullivan is one of the top coaches to high-level entrepreneurs on the face of the planet.
Yes.
The idea is it's not what are you doing right now and just do more of it. It is look into your future and see what do you want to accomplish, work backwards from that, and make it ridiculously big compared to what you're doing now. And the process of doing that means it will change everything about what you're doing now. So that I'll just leave that as a teaser. 10x is easier than 2x.
I love that. That's one I have not heard of. I'm surprised because I've heard of a lot, but I love it. I'm going to add that to my list of books to get. So, team, those two books. Here on a Mission by Donald Miller and 10X is Easier Than 2X, Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy will be on Jeff's show notes page as well. Easy to get. And before we say goodbye, Jeff, what's one more amazing piece of wisdom or insight you can close this incredible conversation with today?
I would encourage us all to go back again and again and again to that definition of a story is where a character wants something, overcomes obstacles to get it, and experiences transformation as a result. As leaders, it is our job to be the guide to help our people get what they want so that we can see change happen in the world. We all have things that we desire. We all know injustice in the world. We all know things that we want to see change in the world. This is how we do that. And it's available to all of us.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.